Hey everybody, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, in which I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons and who I feel are the next generation icons of the weddings and event industry. And this is all to provide education and inspiration. And I'll tell you what, talking about inspiration, every once in a while, as much as possible, I need to do something that gives me the space, whether it's just quiet, a hike or something like that, or listening to some good music. Or what I ended up doing this past weekend, in the middle of all these jobs that I had, was to take an hour and a half and see Amazing Grace, the film that was shot in 1972 of Aretha Franklin's recording of her double live gospel album in a church. It was unreal. And with the Southern Baptist Choir backing her up, I think she was around 29 or 30. And I just got to say, for me, once again, it reminded me of why I'm in this industry. You know, it is such a creative place that we're in, and the opportunity to move people, because that's what this was all about. So I recommend you see the movie or find something. Be sure to give yourself that time to just give us space to be inspired. Really important. So anyway, if you missed last week's episode, it was about Lisa Gardner of Lisa Gardner Communications. Lisa talked all about branding, marketing strategy, and PR. And just a few years ago, she was inducted into the Event Hall of Fame for her contributions to our wonderful industry. So be sure to listen to that from last week. Today's interview, I'm really psyched to say, is with Debbie Geller, owner of Geller Events. Now, some of you might remember that I had a part one interview, let's call it, with Debbie back on January 22nd of 2018. Be sure to go back and check that out if you haven't heard it, because this is part two. Debbie is a wedding and event planner with 20 years of experience designing and orchestrating logistically complex events both in Los Angeles and worldwide. She coordinates intimate weddings to corporate celebrations for thousands of guests. And Debbie really has innovative concepts with a very hands-on approach and much attention to detail that has earned her quite the client list, which includes a group of high net worth families. You're going to hear her approach to creating and maintaining legacy clients with these people. And she has been covered in a slew of publications as well as many other media platforms. Don't forget to listen to my follow-on segment, The Next Level, coming up in a couple days on Wednesday, in which my guest co-host and I tease out some of the highlights of this second interview with Debbie to help deliver specific tactics and tips for you to use to apply to your own business. And my guest co-host on The Next Level is going to be Sean Lowe of the Business of Being Creative. We all know Sean. He has so much to contribute, so that's going to be a great show as well. So enjoy my conversation with Debbie Geller. Well, hey, Debbie, it's so good to have you on the show again.
Thank you for having me back again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, and you know, last time that we spoke, I remember that it was kind of toward the end that I asked you what your definition of success was. And you had said that success is when you feel challenged and it takes you to another level, you know, in your business. And so, you know, it's been at least a year since we recorded part one. So I'm wondering if there's maybe an event or two or some other experience with your career that did that for you, that did it this past year, you know, really challenged you and felt that it helped you to raise your business or yourself to the next level.
I don't know if it's taking us to the next level. I certainly hope that everything we do is taking us to the next level. But we actually have an event coming up in 3 weeks, which is an 80th birthday out of the country for a client that this is now our 5th landmark birthday for her, and many more events for the family. And to have a group of senior citizens outside of the country for 5 days, I think is going to be an entirely different challenge.
That's interesting. Are you talking like 70s, 80s, even 90s? I mean,
it is an 80th birthday.
Uh-huh.
So her friends are, certainly the family is younger, but the bulk of the guests are in their 80s.
Geez, how many guests are you having?
It's going to be about 70 guests.
Wow. That's great. No, I love that. So can you tell me something about the plans, that some of the details, the specifics?
Well, one of the challenges is, and it's funny in terms of our staffing, that we actually added a couple of gentlemen to the job who are simply there to escort the ladies to the various events.
That's great. I love that.
Which is something I've not had to do before, yes, because there are stairs at the property. And so we have an extra large staff just to sort of move people around and make sure that part of it is comfortable.
Now, are these going to be like really good looking guys, right? You might as well do that for these ladies.
They happen to be very good looking, but they're people that we work with regularly who also we hire for their skills and their charm and their ability to be friendly without being their friend, which I think when you're in a service business is one of the most important things you can do. To be very friendly and comfortable without crossing that line. I was just going to say, I realized when I said crossing that line, it makes it sound like it was, a sex for hire thing. No. Not that line.
No, I understand.
But crossing the line of being too informal.
Sure.
So they'll be there just to make sure that everybody has everything they need.
I love that idea, though. What other challenges with it?
Other challenges is, well, this is actually a funny one. Just this morning, we had a call and moved all of the dinners 45 minutes earlier. Because these people are going to go to bed early.
Right. Okay.
So it's just a new way of thinking, but it should be an interesting event. And as you know, we love our legacy clients because every time you do an event, you get to know them a little bit better. And it gets a little bit easier on both sides.
Well, see, that's also something I wanted to ask you, too. I mean, I know that this is very typical for you, dealing with families in which they do become legacy clients. And I know this is not just from us talking before. This is not the first client that hires you for milestone birthdays and, whatever, the anniversary, the wedding. I mean, all these different parties, everything they're doing. How do you feel that you have created such a business that gets so much out of that kind of a relationship? Because I know that's a big part of what you do. You do a lot of like every event for certain high net worth families, right?
We do. And that is the bulk of our business. And I'll tell you, it comes from our first meeting. If we are in a meeting where we're talking about a wedding, we will straight up say to that client, we are not interested in doing this wedding. We're interested in doing every life occasion for you for the rest of your life, and letting them know, because a lot of times that also, I think, helps to engender trust because they don't feel like you're there to make money on one event and move on. So we stress from the beginning that we are there to build a relationship.
That is interesting. I'm just imagining, like, hearing that, if I was sitting there hearing that from you, I just can't imagine many people literally say that right out of the gate. And I like not only the confidence that comes with it, but knowing your desire that that's how you want to service me, such that I am going to have you for everything I do. There is a certain trust, certain comfort level in hearing that. I like it.
Yeah, there is.
So but can you be more specific in terms of what do you feel you do? I mean, I know some of this is obvious. You produce, you plan, you design a really great event for them. They're going to come back. But there are plenty of people I know who wonder, I've talked about this a lot. It's like, geez, I did this great party, but I'm not hearing from them again. Is there anything else you do? Any specific, I don't know if I want to call it a tactic, or a strategy, but anything that you're really focused on, along the way that helps to create this relationship?
Sure. I think it's very simple. I think that we are as loyal to our clients as they are to us. So if a client calls and they're doing a dinner party for 12 and they need beautiful menus and place cards and a centerpiece, there is no event that's too small for us with one of our legacy clients. If a client is going to a party and they need to give a toast, I'll write that toast for them. It's really just making ourselves available to them at every turn. And because we deal with primarily high net worth individuals, they are used to having assistants for everything. We become their social assistant in a sense. And whether that's working with their team or whether it's working with them directly, but we fill that gap on everything.
Do you literally kind of message to them the examples of what you can do? Like, look, we're here to, like you say, we could even write a toast for you. We could just simply do a small dinner party. I mean, are you specific with them so that they understand the extent of what you're capable of doing?
We are. And we truthfully have to be clear that once you are a legacy client, we can do these things for you. I'm not interested in doing it for everybody who walks in the door because we would quite simply run out of time. But once we are at that level, they are made fully aware that we will do anything and everything that they need.
Geez, that's wonderful. I want to also go in another direction because I read when I was preparing for this today, I was Googling you again and I found, No, this is good. I found an interview, I'm not sure when it was, but you talking about first impressions, which really grabbed my attention. And I believe you said, quote, first impressions mean that guests see or experience something they have never before, and it takes them out of their comfort zone a little bit. And then you go on to say a series of impressions should be methodically laid out and need other impressions to happen throughout the event. Can you say something more about that? I love that.
Well, again, dealing with the clients that we deal with, if it's just a beautiful party, they're not going to remember it. So, for example, we did a party this one was about 3 weeks ago, where the entire centerpiece on the table was their first course. So it was a whole tablescape with like 3-inch dishes. And the caterer that we worked with, this is sort of their specialty, but like a 3-inch size dish was hidden all over the table for the first course. And we had people come into that party who have wined and dined everywhere all over the world and had never seen that. And it became part of the conversation. And then brought in later on in the evening, a classical violinist who does a classical violin number to hip hop music as their entertainment. That again left them thinking, I was entertained, but it wasn't sort of in your face entertainment, which makes me uncomfortable. And those were 2 things we did that party that left people talking and saying, this was a cool new experience for me.
Yeah, I love, when you talk about the centerpiece being the meal, as you say, a first impression, unexpected. It does. It sets them up, well, not only to have that emotional response, but now there's anticipation too. So I love when you bring these other things out, you keep doing that. It's wonderful.
You have to keep doing it. And what was great is, again, about that first course is it got everybody talking. What's that in front of you? Can you pass that? And also it just becomes a facilitator of communication, which is great at a party.
Do you recall how you got that idea? Was it like an epiphany one day?
No, I would love to take credit for it. It was the caterer that we worked with. It's actually a restaurant owner, and that is what they're known for at these parties that they do.
Yeah, that's great that you brought that to them. What about the ending of an event? How do you think about that aspect of it?
I love when there's valet parking to put something in their car. So, for example, we did, this was years ago. It was a Halloween party, about 800 people. And the whole thing was, we used to do these very elaborate Halloween parties, and they had a theme every year. And the theme on this particular year was Willy Wonka, which you can imagine how that would lend itself to Halloween. And in everybody's car, we gave them toothbrushes.
Okay.
So it's a little thing. It's not a lot of money, but it just made people laugh because literally they had been in a chocolate wonderland for 4 hours prior to that.
Oh,
and then to get in the car and find a toothbrush on the seats of the car was pretty funny.
That's great. Were they presented in some special way?
They were. They had a fun little note on it. I don't remember what it said because it was years ago, but it was a fun thing.
Yeah, I love that. And also the first time I interviewed you, and I'm going to put in the show notes so that people can find it, because it was a great conversation. You told this incredible story. I'm trying to get all the details now. It's been like a year and a half, but it was some outside where you only had a certain amount of days, and the landscaping, it turns out, was just a mess. And you had to
Yeah, when we had to dye the lawn green.
Yeah, right. Like at the last second, and how you pull up. Did you have anything, since we spoke last about a year and a half ago, anything else, whether it's a wedding or some other kind of an event, where you can tell me a story like that, of the details of what you had to deal with?
Well, thank goodness not like that. We did have a thing, and I think this was after I spoke with you. So it doesn't rain in Los Angeles. We all know that.
It did recently, didn't it?
And it doesn't rain in September in Los Angeles. And we did have a wedding. It was probably a year and a half ago. It was probably about the time that you and I spoke, where the bride went down the aisle. There was, I think, a 5% chance of drizzle. Bride went down the aisle. They started the ceremony and the skies opened.
Come on. Yeah, really?
Skies opened, and literally, Paige ran one way to escort the guests to go underneath this sort of porte-cochere area that they had in their yard. I ran into the kitchen and said, get me trays of champagne and fire me an hors d'oeuvre or 2. And within 3 minutes of everybody standing under these eaves of the house, they were all sipping champagne and eating hors d'oeuvres. And It was a pretty funny moment, and there was just nothing we could do about it. It was just not expected. You expect that in the South. You don't expect that in LA. So everybody, the storm passed. It lasted about 10 minutes. We had seats with cushions. We flipped over all the cushions because there would have been no other way to dry them. Invited everyone out, and then the rabbi who was officiating looked out and said, "It's like rain on your wedding day," which was pretty funny. And the thing about it is it ended up being, as oftentimes things that go wrong do, it ended up being one of their favorite parts of the wedding, because since a chuppah structure is always covered, the bride and the groom and their families stayed under the chuppah during the rain. And they were just under there holding hands and looking at everybody and taking it all in. And it was a beautiful moment for them. The other thing is, just speaking very plainly as I always do, the rabbi that day was a bit long-winded. And when it started to rain, people had begun to tune out. And when they came back with a freshness that just infused life into this. And it ended up being a really great thing and a fun thing, because it is the wedding in LA where it rained on everyone.
Geez, it's so interesting. I talked to a lot of people about this, and even in my own life, personal and business, is that, that cliche, but it really makes sense. When one door closes, another opens. So, and it's managing an obstacle. I've mentioned this many times. There's this book, geez, I should now get some kind of a commission on it, but it's a book by Ryan Holiday called, now I'm forgetting, something about obstacles, but it's basically embracing them, knowing that they're going to come, and looking at it with the perspective of, what can I do with this so that I learn from it? or even in your situation, not in terms of learning from it, but what can I do to turn it around and turn it into something? And you turned it into a moment.
Right. And it's funny. I always say that the universe has a plan. It would just be easier if we knew what it was in advance.
Right. But then look how bored things would be.
It would be. But I do always find that when something happens, it's for a reason.
Yeah, I like that, especially when it seems bad, that there is a reason. Do you have anything, on that topic in the career where it looked like, because you've been in business for a while, you're very successful, you're consistent, where you really thought, maybe not necessarily this is it, but where you faced some kind of an obstacle that really threw you, and then you realize either you turned it into something good or it just turned that way? Can you think of anything in particular?
When it's that bad, I try to block it out.
Okay, that's one way. Yeah. I know for me, there have been moments. So I've got music and entertainment, and I've got these outrageous bands and people who work in them, music director, whatever, singers, great singers. There are times when someone has to move or something like that, where in the early days, I would be devastated. I would be thinking, oh my God, what? Like, this is a key front person. What that, they've been with us for a while. It's tight. What the hell? What am I going to do? I'm getting great response from crowd. And then eventually I learned every single time, even if it took me forever and a lot of auditions, and at the very last minute, every single time I would eventually find someone who in some way would be better, whether it's either better singer, better performer, better attitude, better dancer, whatever it is, and it would take it to the next level. But I still have to remind myself almost every time when something, not necessarily that, but when something that seems that heavy to me, I have a moment where I forget, and I almost have to remind myself, breathe, right, be relaxed, trust.
Trust is huge. So I don't know if this answers your question exactly, but we had a wedding a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, where the bride was Catholic. We had a church booked. She was ready to get married in the church and found herself with child. And by the time of the wedding date, she was going to be showing, and you can't be pregnant and get married in a Catholic church. And that was devastating to her. And so we ended up building the bones of a chapel on the beach. And it ended up being probably one of the most gorgeous things I've ever done. And it never would have happened if life hadn't thrown that curveball.
Wow. That's a curveball.
That was a curveball. And it ended up being absolutely, absolutely spectacular to be in this little temporary chapel on the beach. It was phenomenal.
When you run into a challenge like this, whether there's plenty of time to deal with it or it's last minute, like the rain, do you just have a calm demeanor? Did you have to train yourself to be that way? How do you approach that?
You have to have a calm demeanor. And not just for your client. I think of our clients and ourselves and our event partners all as one team, and we are the team leader. if as the team leader, we're not calm, nobody will be calm. Not the client or any of the other partners on the team. Not the florist, not the lighting person, not the band, not anybody. So staying calm is critical, critical, critical.
Geez, I think you almost sometimes have to fake it.
You're 100% faking it.
Well, but also kind of like a muscle that you have to work on so that eventually it's almost like, what do they call it? Muscle memory even?
It is. And I always work on that when I have a new employee. It's a thing that we always talk about. Like if I see you running across the room, if there's an emergency, that to me is a negative. I want you walking across the room, smiling, saying hello to people, walking calmly, then get right next to me and say in my ear, the kitchen tent just collapsed. I don't want anybody running through an event. That is a great point. Or looking nervous about anything during an event. Yeah.
Just looking, yeah. Oh boy, did I have that look in my early days. I mean, probably years. It's funny because when you say don't, run across, I would, have a different walk, be stilted or be quick or, there'd be a look on my face. I mean, I started to realize I wore it all over myself, my emotion all over my sleeves. And I had to really work hard on that. And I do feel like I'm at the point where I can deal with it now. But that took it was practice.
It definitely is practice. And the other rule that I have when something goes wrong, is never bring it to the client until there's a solution.
And even then, maybe you don't have to, right? Depending on what it is.
Of course, if it's something that they don't ever need to know about, and it's funny, clients, especially clients that we've worked with for years, will call us after an event and say, okay, what happened that I didn't know about?
That's great.
And they think that's a really fun thing.
Yeah.
But if there is a situation, and it could be something as simple as the client wanted light pink peonies and God didn't make light pink peonies their week. So rather than calling and saying light pink peonies aren't available, I'm going to send them 3 choices of light pink garden roses that simulate the look of a peony and say, this is what we can get. It's going to smell better than it did before. And you and your guests are not going to know the difference, but I want you to be aware of the change so that they have the ownership of that.
Well, and you're talking about coming up with a solution before you let them know there's an issue.
Always. The answer is never no, and there's never a problem. There's only options and solutions.
Yeah, I like that. And on our personal lives too. Got to look at it that way. To me, you know what? They both inform each other, right? To me, it's all connected. I want to take a moment to say that if you've listened to my first interviews of Lynn Easton, Tara Gerard, and Colin Cowie, then you would have heard them talking about the value of hiring a PR company and even early in the process. Well, there's an award-winning publicity company that actually focuses on the wedding and events industry, and I'm talking about OFD Consulting. OFD Consulting has placed clients in numerous popular online and print publications, including the New York Times, Martha Stewart Weddings, Style Me Pretty, and many others. And their client portfolio ranges from top planners and venues to respected national brands and industry thought leaders. Go to ofdconsulting.com to learn more. Again, that's ofdconsulting.com. What about also, you've been in this business for a while. The world is changing so rapidly now.
It is.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about social media. I'm not going there right now, but rather, technology, expectations, ease of access to information, all of that. It's clearly affecting, everybody, but certainly the events industry. So, this whole concept of having to constantly reinvent ourselves and stay aware. How do you deal with that?
It's actually interesting because I was having this conversation with Paige in my office just a few weeks ago. We are always a bit slower the first half of the year than the second half of the year. And we had a month that was slower than I would have liked. And she brought out brilliantly the point of, are we slower or are we just more efficient?
Whoa.
And you know what? She was 100% right. I went back and looked at the numbers year over year for the last 3 years. And it's not that we were a tiny bit slower, but it's more that we used to have to pick up the phone to talk to everybody. Now we sit down at the computers in the morning, look at each other. What's our task list? You spend 40 minutes sending emails. And until you're waiting to get things back, that part of it's done. And in terms of doing research with what we have available to us today, that is so much easier. It's just the way that we can work. If you take advantage of the tools that are out there in terms of technology, it can be done much quicker and much more efficiently. So I don't see the task of keeping up with technology as a task. I see it as a gift.
So you embrace it and you'll sit there and learn it. That's how you deal with it?
Have to, because if I spend 20 hours learning something new, it could save me 5 hours a week.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look. I mean, sometimes I have to admit, sometimes even still, I am intimidated by a new technology of some kind or a new software system using in the business, whatever. And I do forget sometimes. First, it's just such a pain in the ass to me. And I forget that, well, wait a minute. Like you say, let me invest, right? Consider the time an investment because it's going to pay off.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing that's changed, which is amazing because we do not a ton. I wouldn't consider us, in quotes, destination planners, but we always do 3 or 4 destination events a year. I'll tell you, it used to make me nervous when we were out of town. Now, if we're traveling, of course, we still share it with our clients. I'm not hiding it, but we are able to do everything remotely. And so it doesn't matter if I'm in Italy or Aspen or Los Angeles, my clients get the same quick turnarounds and they get the same service. And that part of my stress from travel has completely gone away.
Wow. You know, also when you mentioned a destination, I'd love to go there for a minute too. Like just recently I released on the show, interview of Jennifer Stein, editor-in-chief of Destination I Do magazine. And, it's such a different, as you know, such a different game dealing with a destination event than local, domestic. What do you say about that? I mean, and what I mean is that I'm thinking when I've flown around the world, there have been places where we show up, again, music and the sound equipment is awful or it's not what we were promised. And, you got to have sound. You got to sound good. And, some of the challenges.
You have to roll with it.
How do you, you must have some incredible stories from these destination events you've done that you've had to deal with.
So I do. I'm going to say this about destination events, and I don't want this to come off in a negative way because I'm not intending for it to be. It's just more factual. If you are somebody that is a complete perfectionist, unless you have an unlimited budget, do not do a destination event. Well, when you're talking about, for example, the sound system not being what they promised you, if it's somebody that the sound can be great, but people are going to be in Italy and they're having fun and they won't notice it's 100% perfect, you can do that. If you're somebody that sound absolutely 1000% needs to be perfect and you get there and it's not, you're going to have to throw money at it and bring that sound in from someplace else in an instant because you don't have your normal team in front of you. So for me, the benefits of a destination event, which is your guests are not thinking about the fact that they have to be at soccer in the morning. They leave their hometown and so many of their pressures stay at home that creates a whole different energy. People are dancing at 4:00 in the morning because they're not thinking about that they have to give up. They're in vacation mode. And that to me is worth giving up a little of the perfection, because I think what you get from it is so much more. But if you have somebody who is a true perfectionist, you have to have the budget to be able, and you have to be able to explain to your client, whereas normally you would put in a 10% contingency, it may need to be more. I remember we did an event in Budapest several years ago and working with the most professional people there. We had a great team, the whole thing. We had our china and tabletop coming in from Paris because there's nothing in Hungary that we could rent. And there is a rule there that anything larger than a pickup truck can't drive within the city limits. No one told us that.
Oh, you didn't know till you arrived. Okay.
How would I know? That's not something I ever would have heard of. And it's something that I would expect the people at the hotel or the caterer or somebody to say, but you know what? They live in a place where that's just normal. So to them, they would say, oh, you can drive trucks in LA? We thought this was everywhere. So it was 2 days before the event. The truck comes in, it gets stopped at the city limits. And we literally had to find a crew. And this was an easy one to solve. But when I'm talking about you have to throw money at things that just sort of come out of nowhere. We had to rent a cargo van and a crew to park this truck outside the city limits and offload it and take like 8 loads of stuff in.
Jeez. And this is at the last minute on top of everything else.
Yeah, thank goodness it was a day or two in advance, but it threw us behind on schedule. So, when things like that come up, you have to be ready to roll with it, and you have to have a buffer in your budget when you're on a destination event to be able to make them go away, to make problems not be problems.
Yes, you just answered. I was going to ask you, how do you minimize the potential for these kinds of problems?
You ask a lot of questions, and the way we do it, whether we're in town or out of town, is literally to walk through the event in our head. So if let's say I'm going to say basic wedding for purposes of this. I arrive. Who's greeting me? How do I know where to park my car? Is someone taking my car? Once I get out of my car, where do I go? I go to this area. It's hot out. Is there someone giving me a beverage? Is there someone guiding me to the seating card table? And just literally walking through it and then taking it a level deeper. Do I have everything I need for all these places? How is it getting there? Do they know when they're picking it up? And it's just the same checklist. But when you're out of town, you're not working with your same team who knows that those things are on your checklist and who knows what your expectations are.
How do you find teams in countries you have not yet worked?
You have to use your instinct a lot when you're interviewing people, but obviously the internet is huge. Instagram is huge. Looking at, for example, we have an event coming up in Piedmont region of Italy this year, and looking at other events there and saying, that's beautiful. Who were the people on that team? Oh, that's also beautiful. Who are the people on that team? And calling your 5-star hotels there, getting their lists, which is a starting place, but it's not everything because a lot of that's political. So then just digging deeper into, Pinterest and Instagram and blogs and local resources and just seeing where things overlap and who's actually out there doing the business.
I want to talk about finances too and money. It's a very sensitive issue in the industry, well, maybe forever, but especially the last year for sure, is pricing. And there's some people, not that anyone's trying to standardize it. Of course, we can't do it and we don't want to do that.
Oh, no, there are people trying to standardize it.
Well, how do you, if you're comfortable talking about how you price, but first of all, what is your philosophy about pricing overall? How do you view it?
So it's funny because people in the industry have been trying to raise prices. Charge more, charge more, charge more. My feeling is charge what you're worth. And for a lot of people, that means charge less.
Wait a minute, but you mean because maybe they're not as experienced or?
Yeah, there are people who are maybe younger, who aren't as experienced, who are looking and saying, okay, I know these guys charge this. That must be what the market is bearing. Where the level of events that we all do vary so greatly that I think our price points should vary greatly as well. I'm not the most expensive out there, but I've been doing this almost 30 years, and I charge as somebody who has 30 years of experience.
Do you charge, let's say, like a design fee?
I don't charge a design fee. While I am very, very involved in the design, I am not the designer. So I would say that I'm the person who conceptualizes it and works with what the feeling and what everything is with the client. And then part of my job is to help come up with the correct designer for that job. And I work hand in hand with them. So I would say that I'm heavy-handed with design, but I'm not the designer. So no, I don't.
What I meant more was, I'm realizing right now, is not necessarily technically design, but simply a rate to get Debbie Geller, period. And of course, if your destination, if it's not, a scope, for instance.
Right.
So do you do that? You don't do that either?
No, there is. We look at it basically as because we've been doing it for so long, we know about how many hours something is going to take us, and we come up with a price for a job that is commensurate with what our involvement is.
So that they know going in exactly what it's going to be, at least for your services.
Oftentimes, yes. We are on a percentage with some clients, and if we have to put a number at it, we will put a number on it. But it ends up still being roughly a percentage of what the whole job would be.
But structurally, it sounds like there's a couple different structures depending on the client and the situation.
Correct.
Are you able to explain how you decide that? Which determines, that you go with?
Well, I think that there has been a movement in our industry of late to move to percentage, but there are certain jobs that people just aren't comfortable with it because they want to be able to formulate their budget and know where everything is. And I'm not going to lose a client over a large fee because it won't be a percentage. So as I say, if it's, it's still going to be roughly a percentage of what that event is going to be. to come up with that flat fee number, but it just won't necessarily be a percentage in quotes.
Connected to finances, before we wrap up, I remember that the last time we spoke that you talked about running lean and how you're still running lean,
We are still running.
Yeah, I would love to get into that. I mean, we've even spoke, I don't remember if it was just hanging out or if it was on the microphone, but even personally, you are very careful with that, and can you tell me more about that, about the running? I wish I had started running lean long ago. I wish. Oh
Right. Well, and it's interesting because I almost feel like I've gotten leaner, but I don't think I have. I think it's just when you talk going back to technology, most of the people in my company now work remotely.
Okay.
And so, which has, by the way, been fantastic.
I mean, you're saying literally just no home office. That's what you mean by that?
There is no one here.
Everyone's virtual.
Everyone's virtual. And obviously we see each other for planning and for meetings and for the events. I usually see somebody on my team every day. But it ended up being the first person that went remote was somebody who's been with me now, I think about 10 or 11 years, who went on maternity leave and then about 2 years later said, I'd like to come back. And so she works from home because she's a mom. And then I have another one who had a child and ended up moving back to the East Coast, which has been phenomenal. I didn't know how it would go, but I tend to be in meetings all day long and I sit down at night and go, okay, what do I need to accomplish tomorrow? And I'll send her a to-do list at 10 o'clock at night. By the time I wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning, it's freaking done. You know how nice that is? It's amazing having somebody 3 hours ahead of you. So that part of it is great. In terms of running lean, one thing that I very much do believe in is getting the best people and paying accordingly. So I think I actually pay on the upper end of things for our industry, and I'd rather put the money into that than a fancy office or 16 interns running around. I want the people that are working for me to be compensated, and I want it to still be comfortable for me because it is a cyclical business. And, look, the economy's been doing well. It seems to me that even though markers are still good in terms of the stock market and other things, people are getting nervous. People are starting to pull back a little. And I think that you need to run lean to be ready for those times. Because, I've been through many cycles in this industry, and you've got to be able to ride them out. So when you're doing well, put away for a rainy day.
Well, and just the last question about this, what about literally meeting clients? Like where do you meet clients if you don't have an office for them to come to?
We go to them.
Ah, okay.
So a lot of our clients don't even think about the fact that we have an office. When I meet with a new client or over the phone, I will say to them, we should set up a face-to-face. We're happy to come to you. If you had time to run all over town, you probably wouldn't be hiring a planner.
Yeah.
And they appreciate that. It also gives us the ability, if we're meeting in a client's home, to see their style and start to get to know them better right away.
Yeah. And that's most important for you as a planner, as a design, running the design to catch those details.
Oh, sure. If you go to a client's house and they have chintz wallpaper, that's going to be a different party than somebody you walk in and it's all done in a contemporary style.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point. It's an opportunity. It's funny in my business I think it's unusual for music, but I will meet with clients, in person. I want to custom design what we're doing and not just have the music show up and all that. And so I go to a lot of people's houses and it's the same thing. Like I used to have an office. I had an office for many years and I'm the same as you. My staff were all virtual. And I find that, again, I understand if you get to see these details and learn things about their personality. Also, I'm sure you experienced this too. For me, they are different at their homes.
100%.
And I like
100%.
That.
Yeah, I do too. Because you're starting to develop a relationship. They're inviting you into their home.
Yeah. It almost facilitates a quicker connection.
And you also get to see if they even offer you a glass of water. And if they don't, you might not want to work with them.
Right. Yeah. I love that though. Well, geez, Debbie, I love all these topics we covered today. This is great. I'm going to have you on again. Some time will go by. I'm going to have you
Part
on.
3.
Oh, yeah,
Part
absolutely. 3. No, this is great. There's so much for us I learned a ton from you today. So, well, thank you for spending time again with me. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
My pleasure.
And I can't wait to keep an eye on what you're doing and what you do next, and we will hear about it.
I love it. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to my conversation with Debbie Geller, part 2. Be sure to check out her website at gellerevents.com, G-E-L-L-E-R events with an S.com. Her Instagram handle is Geller Events and Facebook is Geller-Events. And you can find all of this in the show notes at theweddingbiz.com. And we ask that you share these episodes. It really helps people to find and join our wonderful community. And if you can give a great review wherever you get your podcast from, that's also something that we really feel grateful for and helps people to find the show. Don't forget to listen on Wednesday to The Next Level, in which I have my guest co-host, Sean Lowe, of The Business of Being Creative. Together, we're going to discuss Debbie's interview and help give you some specific tactical strategies to use for your own business. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you get notifications, and would love if you would follow us. Gee, am I giving you too much information? You could get all of this in the show notes, but if you could follow us on Instagram, especially at Wedding Biz Show. Again, Wedding Biz Show. We want to thank our sponsors, Kushner Entertainment and OFD Consulting. And so we will catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.